Hey guys, so this week is about fasting, and this can be kind of a touchy subject, one that Christians like to ignore a lot. And it's never outright stated in the Bible that you as a Christian must fast, but at the same time, it is rather implied that we should be fasting. We see in places like Matthew 6:17, where Jesus says, when you fast, which would imply that he's expecting that we are fasting. And now, this video isn't about why you should fast, but is more about what is fasting. Without further ado, let's get into it. So what really is fasting? Well, most examples of fasting throughout the Bible seem to overwhelmingly be about abstaining from food and or drink, like Ezra 10:6 and Acts 23:12, which both suggest abstaining from food and drink. And there's also an example of abstaining from certain foods, like in the book of Daniel, as it pops up numerous times throughout the book, that Daniel is abstaining from meats and sweets and wine and is only eating vegetables and fruits and such like that. And there's also other examples of abstaining from non-food things like sleep and sex and stuff like that. So really, fasting is essentially abstaining from an essential piece of your life for a certain period of time in order to grow closer to God. And really, it's sending a very beautiful message, because you're saying, hey God, you are more important than these things that give me life. You are more important to me than that you are a greater source of life, that you are more essential. And it's a very beautiful message to be sending, and it's one that we should be sending. So now let's talk about the frequency and the duration of fasting. Because many people today think that fasting should be a 24-hour event, but realistically, we don't see that as much in the Bible. Something we see quite often is a sunrise to sunset fast, like seen in Judges 20-26, where they were fasting till evening. We also see fasting lasting multiple days, especially on special occasions. Like Paul, when he lost sight, fasted for those 3 days when he was blind, in Acts 9:9. We also see after Saul's death, there was a fast for 7 days in 1 Samuel 31:13. And we also see that Jesus fasted for 40 days in the wilderness after being baptized in Matthew 4:2. And also, we see a case for regular occurrence of it as well, not just for specific occasions, like yearly fasting in Leviticus 16:29-31, where it commands the Jews to fast on a specific day every year. And we also see an example of weekly fasting as well, which they aren't the best example givers, but in Luke 18:11-12, Jesus is defining the Pharisees and is kind of insulting them a little bit here. But he also mentions something that they're regularly doing, which is fasting twice a week. Now, he's against them for being very overt about it, but still the point remains that they are regularly fasting weekly. Ultimately, fasting is not something that is absolutely commanded how long you're going to do it, exactly when you're going to do it, but it's something that's mainly up to you and where you are spiritually. Maybe you're only comfortable with doing it once a year, and from sunrise to sunset, that's okay. Maybe you want to bump it up and do it once a month, or maybe do it once a week, maybe do it 3 times a week. It's up to you. And so it's ultimately up to you and where you're at in your relationship with God. And I mentioned multiple day fast for specific occasions, which is also something important to mention as well. And that leads us into our next section, reasons for fasting. So there are so many more examples in the Bible of fast being called for non-regular reasons. This isn't your once a month, once a week, once a year kind of fasting that we're going to be talking about, but this is something happened and then we fast as a result. There's a specific reason for this fast, and it's not just a regular occurrence thing. So let's explore some of these reasons. So the idea of fasting as a response to mourning pops up mainly in the Old Testament, in places like 1 Samuel 1:11-12. Where David and those with him heard of Jonathan's death, and in their mourning they tore open their robes and they were fasting, and they were just all kinds of grieving and mourning. And this is something that we can understand very easily, even without the spiritual aspect of it, because some things, some tragedies afflict us so deeply that we completely lose our appetite. That we have no desire to consume and to go on and do anything. All we want to do is just lay down and cry. And passages like this in 1 Samuel would seem to imply that it is good to take time and do that. Now that's what David and his companions are doing in this moment. They're just laying down in the extreme sadness and grief. And the Bible talks an impressive amount about grief, especially the Old Testament. And this is very interesting because of the secondary spiritual implications of it as well. Because it gets even deeper then. Because it's more than just laying there and crying, not even taking time to eat, but just being in that mourning. But now you're fasting intentionally, which is very interesting. Because it's ultimately trying to draw closer to God. And so, in this time of immense sadness and grief, in their mourning, they are drawing closer to God. The thing is that we as Christians often see God as more personal in the New Testament than the Old Testament, but that's frankly not true because of passages like this. That God here is the person that they're turning to in their grief. That all they want is to come to God with all of the sadness and the mourning. They just want God with them. That He is the person that they're coming to. That we see this very intimate connection with God, this relationship with Him. Shouldn't that be much more today as well? And we are now children of God. So we have an even more intimate relationship with Him. And so God should be the one that we're seeking in the midst of our extreme sufferings and sadness and mourning and grief. That fasting is an appropriate response to those emotions of trying to draw nearer and closer to God. So another reason for fasting is repentance, like we see in Jonah 3:5, where the people of Nineveh proclaimed a fast. And this is ultimately turning from what separated them from God and turning instead to draw near to Him. And I believe that this is good for believers that are struggling. When you haven't prayed in weeks, when you find yourself sinning more and more, that you should turn away from these things that are separating you from God. And instead, turn towards God. Try to draw near to Him through fasting, because that's what it's all about, is trying to draw nearer to God. So it really is a good response to the times in your life when you feel like you can be further away from God. So the last reason I want to go over is fasting over important issues. And a great example of this is Judges 20:26-28, where the people of Israel are coming before God. And they're like, hey, we've been having these battles with the tribe of Benjamin. They've been doing all this stuff that we don't like, and there's all this stuff going on. God, what should we do? Should we continue warfare against them? Should we cease warfare? What should we do? And they're fasting during this whole people of Israel. They're drawing close to God because this is something so dear in their hearts, because this tribe of Benjamin isn't some outside force. These are their kinsmen. This is one of the tribes of Israel. And these are their brothers, their family. This is something that we should do as well as Christians. And when we have something so dear and important to us, we should be fasting as we pray. There are also going to be some very important issues in your life that you're going to want to fast and draw near to God as you pray. It's an example for us. So we as Christians should absolutely be fasting, even though it's something we don't really like to talk about in church anymore, and that many churches kind of ignore. And we should be fasting, whether that's regular fasting, whether it's once a week, once a year, what have you, or occasional fasting for specific reasons like we've previously mentioned. I would also like to caution you against showing off in your fasting. Now, Jesus is very clear about this in Matthew 6:16-18, that we should fast in secret and not to show off for others. And He's saying here that those who show off to try to get the praise of other people when they're fasting, that's the reward, is praise from other people, that there is no reward from God. But those who do it in secret before God, not for the praise of others, then the reward is from God and not from people, which is very important in our fasting, that we should be humble in doing it before God and not before people. That the praise of people shouldn't be our aim with it, but it should be to draw closer to God. So if you tune in next week, I'll be putting out a video about communion and tithes and offering, which are two things that we do every Sunday. So hopefully it'll be a very interesting episode for you guys. I'd like to thank you for taking this time out of your day to watch this. If you liked it, leave a like. And if you think I missed something or left something out, please leave a comment telling me what it is. And if you want to see more of this, subscribe. And as always, stay safe, friends, and may the Lord be with you.